Hi there, welcome back to our channel. In today's video, we are going to build a simple yet powerful expense tracker using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. This project is great for those looking to organize their finances and also improve their web development skills. Here's a quick preview of the expense tracker we'll be building today. Our expense tracker will allow you to add expenses, view your transaction history, and calculate the total balance, income, and expenses too. You can add a new transaction with the help of name and then amount of 10,000. If I hit enter, it will automatically consider this as a income. Why? Because here we have mentioned if it is income, we need to use plus, else we can use the minus for expenses. For expense, I can add the name and then amount of minus 5,500. If I hit enter, it will automatically consider this as a expense and it will add it here and it will automatically reflect the total balance of the current user. And again, we can add the other expense with the amount of minus 1,500. If I hit enter, it will consider this and it will grow the transaction history. And here we have a option to delete the transaction and the total will be automatically reflected here. This project is a great way to practice JavaScript DOM manipulation and array methods. Don't miss out this fun and educational project, and I upload unique project videos every week. Please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. If you have any questions or suggestions, make sure to subscribe our channel Sarat Chandar K and hit that notification bell to stay updated with our latest content. Now let's dive into the code. Let's open this expense tracker project folder in my favorite code editor, Visual Studio Code. Let me know your favorite and why in our comment box below. Inside the directory, I have already created index.html, style.css and script.js. Inside the index.html, I have added the HTML boilerplate with the help of exclamation mark. Along with that, I have changed the title to Expense Tracker by Sharat Chandar. And below, I have linked other two files, style.css and script.js. Now, inside the body, we need to add the expense tracker content. For that, first we'll add the container with the help of div. For that, in Visual Studio Code, we have a extension to add the div with class value with the help of dot and then value of the class attribute. If I hit enter, it will automatically created the div tag with class attribute and then value of container. Inside this container, we are going to create all the expense tracker element. First, we'll add the h2 with the value of expense tracker. This is a heading of that overall container. Next to this, we need to add one more div with balance. Inside the balance, I'm going to add one more heading element with h3. I will use the heading of your balance, and below this I will add one more h tag with the id of balance. Why we are added the id for this h1? Because this will be dynamically updated from the script.js. So for that I will use $0.00, and next to the h1 I'm going to add one more div with income expense. Inside this we are going to add the two divs, first div as income and then second div as expense. Now inside this div, first div with the heading of h3 and then value of income, and then another div of p tag with id of money plus. This will going to update the money with the help of income, and I'm going to add the class of money plus, and inside this I will add the plus with dollar symbol of static value. Later we'll add the dynamic values into this paragraph tag with the help of DOM manipulation. The same thing for expense also. Instead of income, I will change to expense. For this money plus, I will change to money minus. Of the shortcut of money means, and instead of plus, I will use for minus. And here, this is the first container of the balance, and I'm going to add one more div to show the transactions. For that, first I will add the heading for the transaction with the help of h3, and I will mention the heading of add new transaction. And next to this I'm going to add the ul tag with the id of list, and then class value also list. If I hit enter, it will automatically created the UL tag with the ID of list and then class value of list. So inside this, I will add the LI with no transaction. Here inside this UL, transaction will be added dynamically. So for this, I will add the heading of H3 of transaction history because we are going to list all the transaction history inside this UL, right? So for that, I will place this as above new transaction. For the new transaction, we'll add the form with ID of form because we are going to submit this entire form to add the transaction history. Inside this, I'm going to add the div with form control and then label for text and then value of name. This is the expense or income name we need to mention. And next thing, I will add the input with type of text and then ID of text. If I hit enter, it will automatically created the input tag with type text and ID of text. So here the name is not required. So instead of name, I will add the placeholder to enter description. This description will be a income or expenses. So this will be required. So without this input value, we cannot add the transactions. And then same for another form control. Inside this form control, I'm going to add the label for amount and then value of amount. Next to this, I'm going to add the input type with number because we are going to add the number of the amount and then ID of amount. If I hit enter, it will create as same as before, and here again I will remove the name and I will add the placeholder of enter amount, and this input also required. And next to this, I need to inform the user what should add for income, what should add for expense. So for that, I will add one more label with open bracket and I can say positive with plus as income. We can use or with negative minus for expands. And next to the form control, we are going to submit this form, right? So for that, I'm going to use the button with class of btn and then button text will be add transaction. So that's all for the HTML. Now we need to see this HTML file in action. For that, in Visual Studio Code, we have a extension called Go Live. Here in the status bar, once we click, the tool will automatically run our project into the default browser. Here we can see the expense tracker heading as well as the your balance with income and expense with input boxes. If I hit on add transaction, we'll get the validation message from the form. Now we need to style this. For that, I need to jump to the style.css. Here I have already added import URL of font family Poppins and then global declaration of asterisk to reset the margin to 0px, padding to 0px, and box sizing border box font family of Poppins and then secondary font family as sans serif. Now we need to add the styles to the entire body with the help of element selector name called body. First we'll set the background color to blue color and then we need to set all this content into the center of the screen with the help of display flags. We'll set justify content to be center, align items to be center. We'll set the height of 100 VH. If I save, if I go to the browser, here we can see the background color as well as the content into the center of the screen without refreshing. That is how the live server will work. The next thing we need to add the styles to the container. For container, here we have many divs. So as same as body, we can't able to add the element selector of div. So that only we are using as a class. For this class, we have a container. To adding the styles to the class, we have a selector with dot and then value of container. For this container, we'll set the background color of white. We'll set the padding inner spacing of 20 px and we'll set the width of 400 px. We'll set border radius to 8px. If I save, if I go to the browser, here we can see the container and it placed into the center of the screen. Now we'll add the box shadow to this with the help of box shadow 0 and 0 and then 10px with the help of RGBA color of red to be 0, green to be 0, blue to be 0 and all for 0.1. If I save, if I go to the browser, here we can see the box shadow to this. And then next thing we'll add the styles to the H2 with the help of element selector. We'll set the text align to be center and we'll set margin bottom to 10px. If I save, if I go to the browser, here we can see the changes. And next thing we'll add the styles to this of balance with the help of class selector with dot and style will be text align center. We are going to set all this content into the center of this div and we'll set the background to blue color. It will be different to the container, so I'm adding the different color of blue and we'll set the color of white color. We'll set the border radius to 8px and we'll set the padding top of spacing will be 5px. If I save, if I go to the browser, here we can see the blue color as well as the padding of top. The next thing we'll add the styles to the heading of this balance with h1 because we are added the styles to this h1 inside this balance. We'll set to margin 0 and we'll set the font size to 2.5 rem. If I say, if I go to the browser, here we can see the font size. And the next thing we need to split this income and expense tracker into the right and left side. For that, I'm going to add the styles to this div with the help of dot income expense. We'll set the display to flags and we'll set the justify content will be space between and we'll set the margin of outer spacing will be top and bottom to be 20px and right and left to be 0. If I save, if I go to the browser, here we can see the income and expense it to set to two different direction. That is how the display flux will work. And we are going to add the styles to this income as well as that expense too because we are going to set the styles evenly to both the divs. So I am using the comma and I will add the two div class into the same. So now what are the styles we are adding? It will be applicable to the two divs. Here I will set the flex of 1 and I will add the text align to be center. If I save, if I go to the browser, here we can see the income and expense is set to the center of the div. And for this money, we are going to separate this as two classes. So first I will add the styles to this money with the help of font size will be 1.5 rem and will set the margin to top and bottom will be 5px right and left to be 0. If I save, if I go to the browser, here we can see the difference and we'll get the margin space also. Now we need to add the color of two different styles. So only I have splitted this class as two different parts. For the plus, I'm going to add the styles with color of green and will set the font weight to bold. The same thing I will copy and I will paste it here for this minus also. For the minus, I will set the color of red color. If I save, if I go to the browser, here we can see the income of green color and expense of red color. The next thing we'll add the styles to this transaction history. For that, here we have this transaction history and here we have the ID and then class of list. So for that, I'm going to add the styles to this with the help of class and then value of list. So here we can see the bullet point to the UL tag. So we need to remove this with the help of list style type to none and we'll set the padding to be 0, max I to 120px and overflow y to be auto. If I say, if I go to the browser, here we can see the bullet point has been removed. The next thing we'll add the styles to this no transaction with the help of lir. So for that we'll use this list and then element selector of li inside that. So for this we'll set the background color of white color. We'll set the margin outer spacing top and bottom to be 10px, right and left to be 0 and we'll set the padding padding inner spacing to be 10 px, and we'll set the border right to 5 px solid. And inside here we can add the name as well as the amount. So same as this, we need to set to center of the li with the help of display flags, and justify content to be space between, and align items to be center. If I save, if I go to the browser, here we can see the border for this transaction. So instead of border here, I will set to border right. So here we can see only the color of border right to here. The next thing, we'll add the styles to this form also. For that, here we have this form control. With the help of class, we'll set the margin bottom to 10 px, and this form control we have a label as well as the input also. For that, we are going to add the styles. The form control of label, we'll set display to block, and we'll set the margin bottom to 5 px. Same for input also, with the help of dot form control, and we'll set the input, and we'll add the width of 100 percentage, and we'll set the padding inner spacing of 8 px. We'll set the border to 1 px solid with light gray color, and we'll set the border radius to 4 px. If I save, if I go to the browser, here we can see the styles to the input. Now we need to add the styles to the button also, with the help of button and then class value of btn. For this button, I will use this btn as class. We'll set width 100 percentage, and we'll set the padding inner spacing of 10 px. We'll set the background color to same blue color, and we'll set the color of white, and we'll remove the border to none, cursor to pointer. We'll set the font size to 1 rem, and we'll set the border radius to 4 px, same as input box. If I save, if I go to the browser, here we can see the transaction button. Once we over, we need to change the background color to this. For that, dot btn of over, and we'll set the background color of light blue color comparing to this. So I will use light blue color. If I save, if I go to the browser, if I over, here we can see the difference of the button. So that's all for the design. Now we need to add the text, and once we click add transaction, this should be added into the list. So for that, I need to jump to the script.js. Here first we need to add the declarations to all the HTML elements with the help of const. So I will add the const of balance equal to document. Document is an owner of your web page. With the help of this, we can add the DOM manipulation with the help of get element by ID. So here we have added the balance with the help of ID. So I have used this as a get element by ID, and then second declaration as same as ID of money plus, and then third declaration as money minus. I will copy this and I will use here, and then next declaration as list, and next declaration as form, and next declaration as text, and next declaration as amount. That's all for the declaration. If you want to learn more about this DOM declaration or DOM manipulation, I have added a playlist 52 weeks in 52 projects using JavaScript. I have added the link in the code. Please do check it out. And then we'll add the array of transactions. As I mentioned in the demo, we are going to add all the transaction and maintain inside this array. Now once we click add transaction, we need to add this data into the list, right? For that, I need to create one function with the help of function keyword, and then function name as add transaction. So inside here, I will pass the parameter as e, and will set e dot prevent default. This will be prevent the page reload of the form. Here we'll check the console dot log of text as well as the amount. And for this transaction, here we can check the text and then amount. So we need to initialize this function, right? Then only this should be fire. So for that, we need to add the event listener for this. So for that, we need to add the event listener for the form. For the form, we have already created a declaration of form dot add event listener, and we'll add the event of submit and then function of add transaction. Now if I go to the browser, if I click on add transaction, we'll get the validation. Please fill out this field. Why? Because in this form we have used this required attribute. If I remove, if I save, if I go to the browser, if I refresh, if I add transaction, for the name it will not ask because we have removed the attribute. So again I will undo this. This is a mandatory field. I will save. If I go to the browser, if I hit on transaction, now we'll get that validation message. I will add test and then amount of 1000. If I hit add transaction, if I go to the console, we are getting that test is not defined. Why? Because this has a test. Instead of test, we need to use the text. If I save, if I go to the browser again, I will add the test here and then amount of 1000. If I click on add transaction, we'll get that entire attribute of that DOM element. That is how the DOM tree will work. Now we need to get only the value of this. So I will use dot value. Same for amount also. If I save, if I go to the browser, if I add the test again and then value of 1000, if I hit on add transaction, now we'll get only the value. So for this transaction, we'll create one declaration and we'll pass it into the transaction array. For that, I'm going to create one const of transaction equal to, I will set this as a object of text and then value of text value and then amount of amount value. And now I need to push this transaction into the transactions array. Transactions dot push. This is a array. We need to push this. If I save, now it will push it into this transaction list. Now we can check what this transaction list contains with the help of console.log of transactions. If I save, if I go to the browser, I will open the console and I will add the test one and then amount of 1000. I will add the transaction. Here we'll get the first array and again I will change to test2 and then amount of 500. If I hit add transaction, we'll get the array of 2. That is how the array push will work. Now we have added the text as well as the amount too. This should be displayed into the transaction history once we added into the list. So for that, I need to create one more function with function add transaction DOM with the help of transaction parameter. So we'll pass this transaction into here. So I will copy this and before pushing, I need to add this transaction into the list. So now we have get this transaction. Once we get this transaction, we need to check if it is plus or minus. Then only we can consider this as a income or expense, right? So for that, I can add the const of sign equal to transition dot amount less than 0. We can set this as a minus, else we can get this as a plus. So with this conditional statement, we can get all the time if the user added minus value less than 0, then we'll get the minus. If user added the amount of greater than 0, this should consider as plus. And now once we get this, we need to add this li as a dynamic element, right? For that, we need to create one more const of item equal to, we can create document dot create element. This will help us to create this li and we'll add the item dot inner html equal to, we'll set the string concatenation of transaction dot text what we are getting and I will add one more string concatenation of amount. Now we have created this item, we need to push into that list, right? For that list dot append child of this item. If I save, if I go to the browser, I will add the text and then amount of 1000. If I hit enter, here we can see the test and then 1000. I will add test 1 and then 1001. If I hit add transaction, here we can see along with that we need to calculate the income and expense and we need to delete this test of transactions. So for that, here we can create button of class equal to delete and I will close the button here with a value of x. If I save, if I go to the browser, I will add test and 1. If I add transaction, here we can see the button of x into the list. So we'll style this. For that, I need to jump to the style.css with the help of this class dot button. First, we'll set the width of 25 px and we'll set the height of 25 px. We'll set the cursor to pointer. We'll set font weight to bold. If I save, if I go to the browser, here we can see the button with even space. So now I will add test with 1. If I add transaction, here we can see the test 1 with a button of even space with new styles. So again, if I add new transaction, it will add the same text and then amount. So if I am a user, if I want to delete this, I can check with name. If I check with name, if I click on delete, it will check on this name and it will delete all the rows. So for this, we have a solution to create a new transaction ID for this. For that, we can generate the ID with the help of function, and I will create the function name with generate ID. Inside this generate ID, we can simply return math.random. If you're not aware of this math.random, we have discussed more into our playlist, and we can calculate into this with the help of 10 lakh, and then I will set to this with math.floor. So this will round off with the value. So now I will check what this generate ID will return here inside this console.log, or else I can directly add this generate ID into the list with the help of ID generate ID function, and here we can see the transactions. So I will use this console.log to check this transaction array. If I save, if I go to the browser, here in the console I will add test and 1. If I add transaction, we'll get the array with the ID of 105544. So here we'll not get the same anytime. So again I will add transaction, transaction, transaction. Now we'll get the 4 array with 4 different ID. The name and then amount is same, the ID will be different. So with the help of this ID, we can delete the particular amount based on the user click. So I will remove this console.log, and in the add transaction, I will design this list. So inside this HTML of inner, I will add div to this because we are going to add this color of this div. So I will add the span tag, and I will add the sign of what user is added, and I will add the another concatenation of this math dot abs of this transaction dot amount, and I will close the span tag. And for the button, once we click, we need to remove right. For that, I will create one more function of remove transaction, and we'll get the ID parameter here, and I need to call this function of on click inside this button of this remove transaction, and we'll pause the string concatenation of this transaction dot ID, and we'll check this ID is coming correct or not. I will use the console dot log of ID. If I save, if I go to the browser, I will add test with amount of 1. I will add the add transaction, will get the array. No, we are getting the error. Transaction is not defined. So I have misspelled here. If I save, if I go to the browser, now I will add the test with amount of 1. If I hit add transaction, here it is adding with symbol of plus. Again, I am going to use with minus. If I add transaction, if I go here, we can see the minus here. So instead of this text, I can change this to minus and then plus. If I save, if I go to the browser, I will add test with amount of 1. I will get this plus here, and if I add the minus, if I add transaction, here we'll get the minus. Now whenever I click this, we'll get this transaction ID. If I get on first, we'll get the different transaction ID. Now once we click, we need to remove. That is very simple, as we done many times with the array in the previous playlist. We can simply check transaction equal to transaction dot filter, and we'll get the transaction equal to transaction dot id not equal to id. This will filter this array with the help of passed id from this remove transaction method. So now again I will jump to the browser, test with 10, and I will add the -5 with the same name of test, and I will add the 15 again, if I go to the list, here we have the same name with different amount. So I need to remove this into of 10. Now this is not removing. Why? Because here we have removed from the list, and again we need to refresh this list. So I have clicked this, it is removed. We can check the transaction array from here. So here we have the total 4, but here we are getting only 3 of -5 and 15 and 15. Here in the end of list we have two 15s. I will remove one, and again I will go to the console. If I hit enter of this array, we'll get only -5 and 15. This should be refreshed. For that I need to create one more function of init. For this function init, first we'll reset the list of inner HTML to be empty, because this entire list to be reset, right? I will call this init inside here after removing this id, and will set the transaction dot for each of add transaction dom. So what this will do, we are adding this list of for each, and we are calling this add transaction bomb. So again, based on this value, this will go and send this parameter of transaction, and it will automatically update the list, and it will add it into the list. If I save, if I go to the browser, I will add test with 10 again. If I hit enter, it will add it here, and then test with -10. Here we can see this. So if I click on -10, it will remove the -10. If I click on this +10, this will remove. But here still the no transaction is there, right? We need to show that label. So for that, here if transactions dot length double equal to 0, then we'll create the const item equal to document dot create element of that li, and will set the inner HTML of that item equal to no transaction, same as this with the HTML. After adding this, I need to append this into the list of child. If I save, if I go to the browser, now there is no transaction is displayed. I will add test with 10. I will add the add transaction. Now we have added this. Again, if I hit, it will add it here. Now once we click this, we can get only one test, and then no transaction is gone. If I click again, we'll get no transaction label here, and same as whenever we add, we have a transaction, but still the no transaction is displayed here. We need to update as well as the income and expenses too. For that, we need to create one more function of update transaction. Inside this, we'll create one const of amounts equal to, we'll get this total transaction of this array. We are going to do the map. Inside the map, we'll get the transaction, and with the help of this transaction, we'll calculate all the amounts. So now I will do the console.log to check this, what these amounts contain, and then I will call this update transactions after adding the values into this array. If you check this before the array is empty, then it will be 0 all the time. And once we added, if I save, if I go to the browser, I will add test and then value of 10. If I add transaction, we'll get the value of 10. If I add it again, we'll get 2 of 10 and 10. So once we get this array of all the values, we are going to calculate as sum. We need to add the styles to this. For adding the styles to this item, here we are going to add the item dot class list dot add. We are going to add this transaction based class. So for that, already we have added this above. The same we are going to use. If this is less than 0, then we'll add the minus class to this, else we'll add the plus class to this. If I save, if I go to the browser, I will add test with 10, it will add it here, and I will add the test with minus, it will add it here. So I will go and check. Here we can see the test, and then class of plus will add the style. So for that I will jump to the style.css. For this list I will add list dot plus. For this plus will set the border color to green color. Same thing for minus also. For minus I'm going to add the red color. If I save, if I go to the browser, sorry, this is minus of this class, and then plus class of this class. If I save, if I go to the browser, here we can see the border of green as well as the red. So with the help of this, the user can come to know this is a income and this is expense, and we'll set some padding to this. So for that I will use the same plus of span tag, same for minus of span tag. Will set padding right to 5px. If I save, if I go to the browser, here we can get some space, and then we'll change the color to this with the help of previous class with plus and then -2. If I save, if I go to the browser, here we can see this is a minus. Now we'll add the positive of the income. If I add test, we'll get the green color. Now whenever the first transaction will add, this no transaction should be removed, right? For that, simply we can use this init function after this update transaction. So if I save, if I go to the browser, if I add test with 1, if I add transaction, now the no transaction is removed. As well as we need to remove this input values also. For that, we can simply text dot value equal to null, and same for amount dot value equal to null. If I save, if I go to the browser, now the transaction is there. I will add test with the value of 1. If I hit add transaction, the label of no transaction will be removed and it will added here. So again I will add test -10. If I hit transaction, we can able to see the income of green color and then expense of red color. If I click on delete, it will delete. If I click on delete here, now we'll get the no transaction here. Now based on the add transaction, we can get this value to be updated. For that, here in this update transaction, again I can enable and check this total amount of console.log of amount comma total. So I will add the test of 10. If I save, now we'll get this total amount of 10. If I test with 20, if I hit add transaction, we'll get the total amount of 30. Now based on this, we need to calculate the income as well as the expense too. So for that, with same as this, I will add one more const of income equal to, we'll get this amounts dot filter and we'll get the item. If item greater than 0, then we'll consider this as a income, and then we are going to reduce with ACC of previous value and then item of current value. With the help of this reduce, we are going to add the account of previous value plus equal to item, and then we'll add the 0 with dot fixed. It will be 2 for all the values. The same thing I will copy and I will place it below. Instead of income, I can set to expense. For the expense, only thing we need to change, if it is less than 0, we are going to consider this as a expense. So sometimes we'll get the expense, it will be minus amount. So showing instead of minus, we can show to 0. So for that, I will calculate into asterisk with -1 and I will set all to fixed. Now I will check this console.log of total and then income and then expense. If I save, if I go to the browser, I will add test of 10. If I hit enter, it will add this test of 10 with 10 of total and then income as 10 and then expense as 0. So again I will add test 1 equal to 20. If I hit enter, we'll get this expense of 30 and then total amount of 30. Now I will add test minus and then amount of 20. If I hit enter, we can get the total amount of 10 and then investment of 30 and then expense of 20. All these three value we need to place on top of this. So for that, simply directly we can add this balance dot inner text equal to string concatenation of this total, and for this money plus of this dot inner HTML, because we are adding this income to this div of money plus and money minus, and then I will add this inner text equal to same string concatenation of income and then money minus dot inner text equal to string concatenation of expense, and we need to call this update function. Whenever this init will fire, we need to calculate this update transaction too. If I save, if I go to the browser, I will add the income of salary will be 10,000. If I hit enter, here we can see the balance is 10,000 and then income is 10,000. And again, I will add other income of other one and then value of 1,000. So here we can see the total balance of 11,000 and then income of 11,000. Still, we have not added any expenses. So I will add the expense one of minus 2,500. If I hit enter, here we can see the expense of 2,500 and it is minus to the total amount. Still, we have the income as same. So for that other expense 2 as I will set to minus 500. If I hit enter, now we'll see the total amount is reduced to 8,000 and the expense will be 3,000. So as I said, if I delete this, we can see this is 8,500 and then expense is 2,500. And there you have it. Our expense tracker is now fully functional. You can add your expenses, see your total balance and keep tracking of your spending. Now it's your turn to expand this simple project can be customized further with additional features like filtering by date, categories or saving data to local storage. If you find this tutorial helpful, make sure to like and share this video and also subscribe to my channel Sarath Chandar K to watch more web development content. If you are interested in JavaScript projects like this, I have created and added a playlist 52 weeks of 52 projects in JavaScript. Link in the description. Please do check it out. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, keep coding and keep learning. See you in the next video. Happy coding. Bye for now. Have a nice day.